Hello, everybody, and welcome to our series of Organic Week webinars. My name is Tia Lofsgaard. I'm the Executive Director of the Canada Organic Trade Association. And today we are going to have a very exciting panel speaking about the new buzzword, which everybody's talking about, which is regenerative. And we're going to talk about it in relation to organic. So our first guest speaker is Dag Falk, and it will be followed by Elizabeth Whitlow. And I will give a bio of her as we get into it, but I'm going to start off with acknowledging that we've got two fantastic presenters today. We are recording this webinar. We will be taking questions afterwards. There's a question box at the bottom of your panel, so please feel free to add your questions in there as the presentation goes along. We'll be doing a question and answer discussion at the very end, and I'm sure it's going to be very exciting since this is such an exciting new topic for everybody. So just to give you a sense of who Dag Falk is, Dag has worked tirelessly in progressing the organic movement for the past 3 decades. He joined Nature's Path in 2003, and then he had the opportunity to work with all aspects of the organic movement, including regulations, enforcement, supply chain integrity, and customer expectations. Prior to joining Nature's Path, he worked as an organic inspector for 14 years, auditing all types of farms and processing facilities. He also currently oversees the operation. The grain farm helped pioneer the Regenerative Organic Certification program, which we refer to as the ROC, and is currently ROC certified at the silver level. He's also the co-chair of the carbon sequestration on the Organic Task Force, the past president of the Canada Organic Trade Association, and has served on numerous boards and committees, including the Organic Agriculture Centre Organic Inspectors Association. So I'd like to welcome Dag to be our first presenter for the day. Over to you, Dag.
All right, thank you, Tia. Okay, so I have a lot of ground that I want to cover, so I'm going to be trying to speak quickly. And Tia's controlling my slides, so go to the next slide, please. So, Tia, could you go to the next? Yeah, there you go. So what I wanted to start with was just giving a little bit of background of kind of where the organic movement started. And this movement is about 100 years old. And one of the very early pioneers was Sir Albert Howard. And, you know, he really focused in on compost, and so he traveled from England to India, where he did a lot of work on composting. And he wrote the book, An Agricultural Testament, which is actually sort of a base book for organic. Go. Next slide. And Rudolf Steiner, who we all know is the father of the biodynamic agriculture, but that really had a lot of influence also on the organic movement. Next. And J.I. Rodale, he's the person who brought organic to North America. And he founded the Rodale Press in 1930. And published the Organic Farming and Gardening magazine, which is very well known. Next. So, you know, everybody has been looking at soil health in the organic movement, and I just wanted to make that point, is that that's kind of our background. So now we got this new term that's been talked about a lot in the last 3 years, and so now the question for us in organic is why regenerative? Do we want to be involved with regenerative? Do we want to add regenerative to organic? Is there something that we should be looking at here? So I wanted to start with the kind of the ABCs of carbon sequestration. And what it started with is the awakening, you know, that people had that that agriculture has an effect, can have an effect both positively and negatively on the climate and the climate crisis. And so the issue is that carbon, when it's in the atmosphere, it does harm. It causes, it destabilizes our climate. And when carbon is in the soil, because soil can hold onto carbon more or less depending on the farming practices, and so that idea is, why don't we hold the carbon in the soil, capture it out of the atmosphere, and hold it in the soil, so it will be a positive force instead of a negative force. Next. So we can see carbon, sort of, not with the naked eye, but in bare soil, like a plowed field, like on the right, on the left, you can't see it, but we can sort of see it in a way. We can see the representation of what carbon does in the soil. So when you see lush forest or fields, green growth, and plants basically thriving, that is the result of carbon in the soil. If there was no carbon in the soil, there would be no growth. It would be more like a desert. And so carbon and soil health is very strongly linked. And next slide, please. So what we know about healthy soil is that this is where there is a community of microorganisms. And when we talk about life in the soil, we're talking about these life forms, microscopic life forms that live in the soil. And with their life and living and dying and just being there, consuming nutrients for themselves and then expiring and so on, that process creates nutrients for plants' roots. And and this nutrient is ideally suited for plants' roots to grow strong plants above ground. And then other effects of soil is that it's a storage facility. So it creates these organisms. They create what we call tilth in the soil. It's where it's aggregated and spongy, and it holds water, it holds carbon, and it holds nutrients. And another effect of healthy soil is it becomes a super filter, so that it filters rainwater when it comes down before it hits the aquifers. And the big point there is that all of this health in the soil, it has carbon, but the carbon that's in the soil is a result of all this activity in the soil. And if you didn't have the microorganisms living in the soil, you would also not be able to capture carbon. Next slide, please. And so regenerative, what it has brought about, like now that we're enriching our conversation in organic and now with regenerative, it's bringing forward the focus on soil health. And that's one of the things we didn't tell you as well, talking to consumers and everybody who's interested in organic. What we told, the story that we told very well was that organic doesn't use pesticides and herbicides and chemical fertilizers. And everybody knows that. And so we succeeded, we got the message across. But what we didn't talk enough about is that organic is actually based on the positive principles of soil health. And that the benefits of organic food isn't just because it doesn't have residues, chemical residues in it, but it's also because it's based on a perfect nutrition provided to plants' roots through this soil health. And so this opportunity that we have now with the discussions about regenerative is to talk more about that. And so that's why I welcome this conversation. And I think it's a really good thing for organic to engage in this conversation and talk about what we know a lot about, which is soil health. Next slide. So we already know that a lot of the organic farmers that have been around for a long time that practice organic to the highest level, the farmers intricately interested in creating healthy soil in an organic way and follows all the basic principles of organic. A farm like that is already going to be regenerative. It's going to already be practicing in a way that's compatible with the ways that regenerative organic is. And so, Elizabeth is going to be talking to us after this in more detail about the ROC program. That's the Regenerative Organic Certification program, which which has an additional standard on top of organic. And so I just wanted to kind of point out here is that we're on the same page, we're going the same direction. Organic at the highest level is already very, very close, if not the same as regenerative. But there are farmers, of course, that haven't been organic for very long yet, and maybe not practicing and incorporating all the practices at the highest level. Next slide, please. At Legend Organic Farms, that's a farm that the founders of Nature's Path, Aaron and Ratna Stevens, have owned, and I manage the farm, and the reason that we have this farm is so that we can experiment with our own supply chain and help our supply chain reach further and deeper into regenerative and organic practices. So here you can see in the picture there's a cover crop mix, which is one of the practices that that we've incorporated in last year's season. And a cover crop mix like this is a typical example of a regenerative practice. Next slide, please. So some of the things that organic farmers need to do in order to comply to the ROC certification is, well, I'll give you some examples from our farm. So we achieved a silver level certification with ROC the first year that we applied for certification, which is a good indicator for me that organic farms can fit into this regenerative organic certification quite easily. So what the changes we had to make is we had a very close and careful review of our tillage, and we compared our tillage timings and depths and everything, how we approach tillage from before to the standards, what the ROC calls the framework, which is the standard for ROC. And we made sure that we were in compliance with that. So there were some changes, but not very many changes that we made there in terms of timing. Cover crop intensification, we like the picture I showed you was one of the, what we call cocktail cover crops or green manures that we used. It increases the life in the soil because each one of those different species provides a different environment and ecosystem for microorganisms. So it enriches the biodiversity below the soil. We had to add social fairness focus. Like in organic, there is not a lot of documentation that's needed, if any, for social fairness, pay of workers and housing and all of those kind of issues. And so the ROC has added those, and so we had to add some documentation on that front. And then we did additional soil testing for carbon beyond what we have done in the past for organic. And the reason we did that is to get a baseline of carbon in our soil, so we know our starting point and we can see and now track in future years if our practices are increasing the carbon held in the soil or not. Next slide, please. So what some of the differences are, and I think when I'm looking at it, and these are just some of the more the language that the different systems use. So in organic, we've always talked about soil health and providing nutrition to the soil life or the life of the soil. We use green manures, and we rotate crops. And the big principle that we always follow in organic is we mimic nature. Whenever we have a challenge, an organic farmer has a challenge, they look to nature to see how nature would solve that challenge, and then we try to find ways of mimicking that methodology. In regenerative, the focus is on capturing carbon, so that seems to be the main kind of concept that's driving it, the conversation and the programs. And it's focusing on preventing erosion so that we don't have runoff from heavy rains and so on. So covering the crops is focused on strongly to make sure that there's always a living cover or a crop residue cover on the soil to prevent that erosion. And then, of course, the same as organic rotation of crops. And there's a lot of focus on disturbing less. So tillage is seen as a risk practice that needs to be reduced and or eliminated. And Elizabeth will probably talk to you about the 3 levels of certification in ROC. Okay, but yeah, next slide, please. So for consumers, eaters, people who eat organic, why should they care about regenerative organic? And I think the conversation is just reaching consumers now, and we're going to see how that how the response of consumers is to the regenerative concept. And I expect that it will be a positive response, and that they will be interested in it, just like they're interested in organic. And of course, if a consumer is already an organic consumer, they're already aware of personal health benefits and environmental health benefits of organic. And the big additional piece that regenerative adds is the focus on planetary or climate health. Next slide, please. Now, we've talked about organic and we've talked about regenerative organic, but there's also movements or groups that are promoting and talking about farming groups and so on, talking about regenerative without linking it to organic. So I would, just for description's sake, I'm calling that non-organic regenerative. And so what's the difference between non-organic regenerative and organic regenerative? And basically non-regenerative generally does not require the giving up of agrochemicals like pesticides and fertilizers and genetic engineering. And so that's really the difference. They don't have that as a baseline. And with the regenerative and organic, the baseline is that regenerative is built on organic. And so that automatically doesn't allow for those inputs. And so when, as a consumer, if you want to choose one kind of regenerative but not another kind, you need to look into whether it's a system that prohibits those inputs or not, because that will make a big difference in terms of the rigor of the regenerative, in my opinion. Next slide, please. And so these oats are grown on the Legend Organic Farm, and it's a great crop. These are last year's oats. And the next slide, please. The Nature's Path launched a product with this product. Because it was we only had one ingredient because we were part of the pilot last year and received the certification. We wanted to get it into the marketplace in some form. And so because it was a single ingredient that we had certification for, we chose a plain oatmeal product. And it's a limited edition, and I'm afraid to say it's probably sold out in most stores already. And this year we're growing even more oats and hope to keep this product on the shelf permanently. So that was quick, I hope, and I covered some ground here, and I'm looking forward to questions and conversations later and hearing from Elizabeth. Back to you, Tia.
We still have Tia.
Thanks very much, Dag. That was very interesting. Okay, so we are going to hand it over now to Elizabeth. I'm just going to make her the presenter. She can get hers set up.
Yep, let's
So
just
go
make sure
ahead
I have
there.
the right screen. Do we have the
We
right? Yep. Excellent.
Perfect. So I'm just going to do a little intro of you. So Elizabeth Whitlow's role as the Executive Director of the Regenerative Organic Alliance is the culmination of over 20 years for systematic change in agricultural systems. Elizabeth began her career as an advocate for shade-grown, fair trade, and organic coffee growers in Central America. Since then, she's been working across the spectrum of elevated certifications, both in farming and in ranching. She's now leading the charge for the regenerative organic agriculture, managing the holistic high bar of the Regenerative Organic Certified standard. The ROC is the North Star of certifications, building upon the USDA organic label through the pillars of soil health, animal welfare, and social fairness. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me. And first off, a big thank you to DAG, such a pioneer in this field. And you've just been an invaluable source of advice and help to the ROA throughout this whole process. And likewise today, you set this up perfectly with your history of organic and some of those concepts that I would have covered if I had more time. So that was perfect. And thank you very much. I'm glad you all are here and look forward to your questions and comments. What I'm going to do is I'll just kind of dive in quickly, give you some further background about the Regenerative Organic Alliance, or the ROA, and basically who we are, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it. And with the how part, I'll share some highlights of our pilot program with you and what the key takeaways were from that process over the last year and a half, and where we are now, of course. And I'll go quickly so we can have time towards the end. But it was great that DAG started off with Sir Albert Howard and Rudolf Steiner, and then Rodale. The Rodale Institute is one of the founders of the ROA, and they have long been a pioneer and really were largely attributed with bringing organic to the United States with J.I. Rodale's work. His son, Robert Rodale, is the one credited with coining the term regenerative. In fact, he came up with this term regenerative in response to a question about sustaining practices on the land. And he described what he thought is more important was to regenerate the land and to really have this holistic approach to farming that doesn't just sustain it, but it actually builds and regenerates it. So the origins of the ROA, they started with the Rodale Institute, but it was led by Patagonia Company and Dr. Bronner's. You may know both of those companies. They're pretty beloved down here as leaders on the forefront in the organic sector, and Patagonia has largely been known for their apparel division for many years, but you may not know they have a food division and increasing interest in food and agriculture, regenerative organic agriculture, to fuel their food division. Dr. Bronner's has been intensely committed to this movement the whole time, and I'll show you some of the pilots and some of the grower groups we were able to work with throughout our pilot because of Bronner and Patagonia's support. These groups, the stakeholders all came together at around the end of 2017 at the Rodale Institute, and really this was 40-something stakeholders in the organic sector in the US who were concerned with the direction they saw organics heading, and they wanted to talk about their vision for the future of organic farming. And what they came up with was the framework that we refer to as the Regenerative Organic Certified, or the ROC. And really, I just would go back to Rodale saying that healthy soil equals healthy plants equals healthy people. What we do to the soil, we do to ourselves. And by degrading our soil, we degrade it's the bedrock of our civilization and our culture. And so really by depleting and eroding the soil, we do so much more damage. And so that is really one of the core tenets of the work we're doing here at the ROA, is to restore and build soil and thereby protect ecosystems and grow healthy food and fibers that will feed and protect people. And so the way we are defining this regenerative organic, it's a way of farming that focuses on building and supporting healthy soil and ecosystems and abstaining from the use of toxic chemicals. But we also add in these other provisions around livestock, and that is the animal welfare pillar, which requires ethical and humane treatment of animals, as well as the social fairness pillar that DAG mentioned. And this is about fair conditions and treating farmers and farm workers fairly. The question I get a lot is like, how is this different from organic, and why is it different? Why is it needed? And so I would just want to say, first and foremost, having worked in organics for nearly 20 years, that I hold it as a very high regard. It's the gold bar currently. It's the highest eco label that consumers can reach for, and it's an excellent designation, and it's hard earned. And many organic farmers are meeting the regenerative standards. However, the organic standards here in the US anyway do not have any provisions about fairness for farmers or farm workers. And the animal welfare provisions were rolled back by the current administration. So the humane treatment of animals and the outdoor access and life on pasture that many animals deserve and thrive under is not as embedded in our organic program as it may be in some other regions. I know Canada has very strong standards for that. The additional criteria we have, I'll get into some of those here in just a moment when I share those 3 pillars and some highlights from the 3 pillars, and then also talk about the different levels of certification that we have, which is, I think, a really unique approach to this framework. And really, bottom line, the ROC was created just because it is time. It's time to make these clear and calculated changes to our food and fiber systems. And our founders, in particular, Rose Macario, who is formerly the co-chair of the board and the CEO of Patagonia, as she said, the time is now. It is urgent, and we need to act. We need to be collaborative, and we need to move with a sense of urgency because of what's happening with climate change. And I can certainly attest to that. I'm zooming in today from Northern California, where it's felt like we're under siege, and we are, in fact, under siege of wildfires throughout the whole West Coast. In particular, in my region, this is the 4th year we've had to evacuate. Yesterday, I woke up 6 a.m. for a webinar, and it was pitch black outside until, gosh, I don't know what time the sun finally emerged through the smoke. Was around noon. People were using headlights and flashlights, harvesting grapes with headlamps. Climate change is real and it's happening, and we want to address that. And that's why we're moving pretty urgently towards this, and have been. I feel like I've been on fire the last 2 years trying to get this program implemented. I don't want to use that metaphor. So let me just jump back to the 3 pillars here. And here you see the 3 pillars are soil health, animal welfare, and social fairness, and got some highlights from each of those pillars here. Love you to go to our website at regenorganic.org and open up that ROC framework and look more deeply into this. This has changed. This is the 3rd or 4th version of the framework. So when all those folks came together at the Rodeo Institute and they got inspired and they came up with this framework, and it was all about no-till under the soil health. The first principle was no-till. Well, that doesn't work in farming. We all know that farmers need some tools. They need to be able to cultivate, and we worked really hard towards this low-till, and now towards more of a conservation tillage, or actually what we're calling it is more about minimizing soil disturbance, as Dag mentioned earlier. And so, you know, the framework has definitely changed in response to a lot of stakeholder feedback and through a public comment process, as well as through our pilot process, which I'll tell you more about in just a moment. I'm going to move here to these 3 levels, so bronze, silver, gold, and this basically will build in that concept of continuous improvement. So you don't just get to this one spot and say, okay, I'm organic, it's all good, or I'm at this level and it's good. You're going to be increasing your practices over time and moving through until you get to what we like to refer to as the North Star, that gold level. And each of these different levels require different number and scope of regenerative organic practices as defined in our framework. I wanted to share some of the results from our pilot with you. Now, this process took quite some time. We worked with NSF International. They were a great partner for us as a global entity with offices around the world. They were the program manager who helped build up all the tools for certification. Everything that we did was based on international conformity assessment standards for certification, ISO 1765 specifically, for those of you who are interested in that, those detailed aspects of it. That process took some time. It took several months, and just to get those tools in place and to select and review and approve certifiers. We ultimately officially approved 4 certifiers to do the pilot work. And then, oops, sorry about that. Didn't mean to do that. We had 19 pilot participants. We worked all around the world and all around the US from west to east. We ended up doing 24 on-site audits, and we did these in places as far away as Ghana. We were in India and Sri Lanka. We were in Argentina and Nicaragua, and then all across the US, up there into your land, up into Canada. That was the only one we did, I'm sorry to say, but I see a future where we'll be coming back to Canada really soon. We tested out a wide variety of commodities as well. And so we looked at temperate zones, subtropical zones. We looked at annuals, perennials, different types of livestock systems. I would say, admittedly, we missed some, and we, so now we're looking more closely at poultry in particular. We've had a lot of interest expressed to us from the poultry industry, both layer operations and broiler. And we also, we did a small scale review of pastured pork, but there's been a lot of interest from that as well. And so I expect we'll be testing out some of the development of standards for species-specific livestock in the coming year. We also very much recognize that our certification, the ROC framework, was farm level and didn't quite address the full supply chain. And so over the last few months since we concluded the pilot, we've been trying to narrow in on all those different areas that we needed to capture to ensure full traceability for a ROC product from farm all the way to the breakfast table when you get to have a warm bowl of Regenerative Organic Certified oats. And I was a lucky recipient of one of those sold out boxes. So grateful for that, Dag. If y'all can see my screen here, I'm showing some of the products that ended up being certified as a result of the pilot. So we have a few more that have come out since this slide was made, and I expect a whole lot more to come. We have had a lot of interest. We have a pretty long spreadsheet of companies, farms, brands from around the world who have been reaching out and just chomping at the bit to get certified, which is kind of ironic because most of the time you don't think of farmers really wanting to jump through the hoops and go add another certification or another series of requirements and compliance hoops and so forth. But so far from my end, all I can see is a lot of enthusiasm to adopt and to be able to apply for certification with us. I want to talk to you a little bit about the revision process, which I alluded to earlier. And again, this is something just like setting up for the pilot. The breakdown and processing of the information afterwards was critical. It took us over 7 months, working felt like around the clock. We had 3 different task forces and advisory boards. We had independent consultants and an informal advisory board. We had farmers from around the world. We had soil scientists, organic inspectors, animal welfare and fair trade experts, as well as brand advisors. And then all the recommendations that all of those different entities would make to us through a very strictly guided process with NSF chairing, helping develop that whole process. So we had an impartial chair for each of those different task forces and advisory boards who would collect the recommendation and make it to the ROA board, who then deliberated on and ultimately voted for the changes that are now to be found in this latest version of the framework. We have a lot of different resources now available on our website under the, it just got changed. I think it says apply now and then in applicant resources. And so here, just as far as, this is where we went through this, organized all the feedback and then revised it. And we also developed a new regenerative organic system plan template, which is available on our website. It's quite comprehensive. Don't be daunted by it. If you look at it, it will be tailored to each operation based on whatever certifications they hold. And so we have an equivalency analysis or a gap analysis that will show if you have say, EU Organic and Demeter, then there's certain questions and sections of the soil pillar that will not apply to your operation or to your audit. Same goes for the social fairness. If you have Fair Trade International or Fair Trade USA, then it will eliminate certain sections from our social criteria because those are already addressed by those existing certifications. And so the regenerative OSP that's on our website is quite comprehensive. But it's also got some really interesting tools in there for you to use, such as looking how to assess biodiversity on your farm, looking at your cultivation practices, tillage practices, and so forth. And yeah, I think it's a really great tool for farmers getting on the road to regenerative organic, and I encourage you to go look at that. We are just in the last stages of developing all of our final training materials. We've got our official soil sampling guidelines available now, and that was another big learning curve that we went through during the pilot. We were looking at 18 different indicators from the soil tests and realizing like that is the work of academics, that is deep work that is funded and takes place over like universities or research stations, and that we can't put that on the backs of farmers, but that we wanted to do is get an assessment, a soil test. But we basically, with the Soil Health Advisory Committee, we reduced the number of indicators from that higher number to a total of 6 the first year, and then testing every 3 years after that, and then you only have to test for 5 indicators. And we're very much aligned with the other groups that are working towards this, working with other regenerative farmers who are not yet on the organic path, and that's the Soil Carbon Initiative, and so looking at those same indicators so that we can be aligned and harmonized with other movements happening. And I do like to say that we need to build a big tent. We are less than 1% or maybe 1% of agriculture in this country. I'm not sure what it is in Canada exactly, but organic, it needs to be, when we're 99%, we can afford to get picky about things. But right now we all need to work together, and we need to build this movement. We need to bring the regenerative farmers in and help them see the value of not using pesticides and the values in having improving their soil fertility and keeping the ground covered, and all the different benefits that are being proven to come with regenerative organic practices. And yeah, that's what we're here for. The ROA exists to create the highest standard for agriculture in the world, and we're going to do everything we can to help enable this movement and to help farmers get on this road. And so with that, I would love to just share the last of our vision here of what the ROA's vision is, and then ask Dag to join in, and let's just open up for a Q&A. And I think we have, what, 20 minutes or so? Hope I went fast enough. Tia, you want to join us? There, yes, we have 22 minutes, so there we go. Let's see if we have Tia. I think she was having some trouble with her internet earlier. Huh. Well, Dag, we could ask each other questions.
We got in the question bar here, we got some questions have come in already.
Great.
So
looking, I can't, oh, I see it.
You have to expand the questions, it seems.
Oh, I can't see them. I'm a presenter, you're an organizer, so you can see them.
Oh, is that right? Okay, well, so maybe until Tia rejoins us, I'll read through some of the questions. So Marla Carlson she says, thank you both for the presentation, for the information they provided today. I have a comment rather than a question, and I'm interested to hear responses. In Canada, we have a real opportunity over the next 5 years to create best management practices that build soil health, regenerative agronomic practices, cover crops, green manures, intercropping, stronger crop rotations, etc., and incorporate them into the Canada Organic standards during the next revision period. We have already started doing this with the fairness principle, and a statement has been included as an appendix. Correct me on the terminology here. So yes, I can try to comment on that. So, I mean, that's one of the questions I think that this has raised is, should we improve the organic standards to include all the aspects that the ROC program is bringing, adding to organic? Is that the right approach, or is this add-on labeled the right approach? And I go back and forth on that question. My preference has kind of always been that we should make organic the strongest it can be and keep everything under one roof, kind of thing. But the realities are that when you start looking at how to accomplish that, it typically doesn't. The various forces that make it more difficult to improve standards quickly are those are strong barriers. And to give you an example, the non-GMO project was created similarly to this. It was an additional program to the organic program. And was that necessarily, or should it have been included? The standards that the non-GMO project has, should it have been included in organic? And I worked strongly on the Organic Trade Association board in the US to try to convince them to lobby the national organic program there to include stronger language for maintaining organic free of GMO contamination. And that was apparent very quickly that would take 10 years, 20 years, 30 years to accomplish, just because of the bureaucracy, getting everybody on the same page. So the non-GMO project was created as a quicker way to achieve the same goal. And I think we have a similar situation here. And so rather than fight it, we should, that's my view right now, is as long as it represents the integrity that, that we have in organic and that we want to keep, and this is an addition to that, and it's going along on that same pathway, then I don't see any harm in it. And I see it as a great helping factor to keep the conversation going, to spread the interest and knowledge about farming in general and what the issues are. And it helps to strengthen where we're going faster in the short term. Elizabeth, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I do. I tend to agree with you on that, Dag. And I would just say, like, I live here in a country that is incredibly divided. The politics are explosive and bitter, and getting this kind of, like, having some action, urgent action happen in this national organic program rule that would require changes from lawmakers is going to take years, and we don't have years. And again, like, as I mentioned, I'm surrounded by wildfires, and this is the 4th year of it. And these wildfires are now all the way up the coast. And as I heard a climate scientist from Stanford read yesterday, that, like, we are in uncharted territory. And the fact that we have these firestorms from Mexico to the Arctic is something that is a real indicator of, like, the changing climate and the need to do something right now. And so for me, it's just the action. We need to act now, and it takes too long. And so what we can do is be that lever or that stake in the ground as this higher standard. And we do, we communicate with the NOP. We have very much embedded throughout the framework that is based on NOP and always will adhere to that in principle and in any aspect of our standard, which is why we do require that growers have USDA organic as an equivalent. And so I think that kind of collaboration or working with them is better than working against them. And I've had, I think, fairly good positive responses from staff from the NOP, as well as in reaching out to the OTA as well, and in this country, and other groups, the U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance, for example. I participate in a vision group with that group, and it's very large scale ag in many ways, but everyone's seeking solutions. And so the better we collaborate and work across the aisles to each other, the faster we're going to get to some solutions and better understandings of each other.
Great. Another question for me here from Jerome Antoine. And did the use of more soil analysis with rock benefit your production system design? On our farm, I would say that the soil tests, it's not just the carbon, it's the totality of the information that you get from a soil test. And it helps any farmer to identify the variations in the fields. What field is doing great? What field is missing some kind of nutrient level or mineral level or something? And so what you're using soil tests for is to try to determine those things so that you know what you need to focus on building over the next few years. So yeah, so we continuously we use that. The carbon, including now the carbon measurement in the soil test, I wouldn't say that single metric has helped us yet, but it's more that in the longer term, so in 3 years from now, when we retest for carbon, we can see whether we've actually improved that or not. And so I think it's too early to use that as a systems design tool, except for, like I said, with the whole soil analysis, it could be like that. And another question, second part of the question, or about the provincial labor laws. Don't they already cover the basis of social fairness? I think there might be some aspects that are stronger in the ROC framework, and maybe Elizabeth, can you comment on that?
I don't know the labor laws there, and that's the catch really, is that it varies around the world, and we have a lot. I don't know about up there, Dag, maybe you could shed light on this, but I think 65% of our agricultural labor force here are undocumented migrant workers, and so are they treated fairly under the law? I don't know. And so we have some really insurmountable issues here around people not being treated fairly, and we saw it when COVID broke out, and farm workers and food workers in the processing facilities and the meat packing plants, they couldn't afford to take a day off because they're not necessarily paid fairly, and they don't have sick pay or they don't have health insurance. Like, they don't get to take days off. So the COVID spread rapidly in those communities, and I'm sure that part of it is the way that our systems are set up. Even though those packing houses might be meeting the law, it varies in how it's implemented, I think, and depending on somebody's status as illegal or illegal. And we did recognize that it's different, and in countries like what they call the global north versus the global south, where it's not a term I absolutely love. You can think of it as like developing world or developed world, or OECD countries and non-OECD countries, basically countries where there are labor laws, like the commenter mentioned. And so we are requiring that you have a social certification if you're operating in those countries in the global south. And if you are in, say, Europe, Canada, or the US, that we are trialing, we are doing the whole social criteria and not requiring another recognized social certification, so that we can ensure that workers are getting treated fairly. And it's a very complex issue. I've learned a lot about it in the last year and two, and have a lot more to learn. Yeah,
and that's what we found as well. So, it was new to us to sort of focus as strongly on this from what we've done before. But further comment here is, from what you said, seems that integrating the ROC's social fairness aspects only made more paperwork for your farm. And yes, there wasn't any non-compliance issues that we had to repair, or fix. It was more being aware of exactly what's what. And so, in other words, we were already treating our workforce with our team according to the ROC guidelines. But yes, but we had to document it. So that is new. So it is additional paperwork, which of course farmers hate. But I think once learn the system, learned a new thing, it's probably not going to be very hard next year. It's going to be easy. Once we've kind of put our mind to it, I think it's going to be pretty automatic going forward.
And I think it's also important to emphasize it's not just about documenting it, it's about the practices and the fact that somebody can come and speak to those workers, and the workers have the ability to speak freely without repercussions or fear of losing their job, or that that there's a sufficient system for them to file a complaint without risk of losing their job, for example, and that there's a way to interview the workers and determine that. And so I think there's still a lot to learn about how we implement that social pillar in the global north or in countries with already pretty strong labor laws. But we'll be open to comments and hearing from you all throughout the coming year as we expand and start really getting out and doing more audits. I do want to go back to that soil question too, because we aren't just after carbon. We definitely, as Jeff Moyer, the ED for Rodale says, like, not all carbon is created equal, and we're not just relentlessly pursuing this carbon measurement. We're looking at it as a holistic thing. It's soil health is really it's a whole bevy of other the microorganisms, as we all in this room probably know, like 7 billion microorganisms in a teaspoon of soil. It's not an inert growing medium, and it's teeming with bacteria and fungi and other microbes. And the carbon is basically like a storage house for them. It's an indicator of that. And so that's why a lot of people are looking to this. And it's not also just for the purpose of carbon trading, or kind of the smoke and mirrors of the carbon market, so somebody else can pollute, so that farmers can sequester carbon so someone can pollute. It's not the point of it. It's about healthy soil and creating healthy soil and looking at different factors that would help us determine if the regenerative practices are indeed improving the health of soil over time.
Yeah, good point. I got another question for you, Elizabeth, from Jerome as well. How do dairy rock producers deal with no dehorning, this budding? Isn't there a farmer safety issue there?
Yes.
Those cows on the grass-fed milk square of the pilot program slide do not have them. So yeah, so there was a slide where you
a slide about the dairies. Okay, so yes, it's a great question. It was we tested out 3 different grass-based dairies from Northern California, Southern Oregon, to Michigan, to some farms upstate New York. We ran into a lot of challenges with the way the previous framework was written, the animal welfare pillar, in particular relating to that disbudding and confinement, because a lot of the areas up in the northern regions have tie stall barns. The animal welfare community cannot abide by the concept of a tie stall barn where an animal goes in and is tied up the entire winter, and that's reasonable. It's hard for dairies because they have this old infrastructure they've inherited of 100-year-old tie stall barns. It's very expensive. Dairies have been operating at incredibly thin margins, and organic dairy farming used to be one really bright spot in organic or for dairies, and now that market is just as volatile, and part of that because of these allowances for very large scale dairies. And so we recognize that, and we've changed the standard. It said no tie stall barns before. Now there's a 2-year grace period for a dairy that has a tie stall barn to build out a different style of barn, and we'll be looking for ways to help assist that. I think NRCS has some grants here for that. And another area that was a really big problem for some dairies was there was a prohibition from individual calf hutches. And so now we are requiring that dairies transition to group pens, and they begin trialing it immediately. And so that by year 3, they are functioning in group pens rather than having the calves in individual hutches. That's a big shift for the dairy sector. And I understand the many complications to that as well. The disbudding that was prohibited is now allowed, but has to be done before 3 weeks of age. So, that's so that it's supposed to be the most, painless way and approach is to do it before they're 3 weeks of age. After 3 weeks of age, there needs to be a veterinarian involved and so forth. And then the producers are to try and incorporate polled species into the genetics of their herd. I understand the challenge of that, it's hard to find a polled dairy, those genetics. And so they have to be trying it for a portion of their herd. But that's where we landed on that. So thanks for that question. It's a really good one.
Yeah, great. And I got another one from Maggie Long and Elizabeth. Most of the pilot farms look like big name companies. How is the ROA making it easier for small scale farms to get certified? I know with the organic certification program, many small farms don't bother because the cost outweigh the benefits.
Yeah, well, it's another great question. Thanks. You're right. We had a lot of pioneering brands who opted to, they brought us the farms they're working with. So, you know, with a lot of those farms, it's like with Bronner's, for example. So they brought us a grower group in Ghana who grows palm and has this amazing agroforestry project there, doing really excellent work. They buy all the palm they can get from them for their soaps. They brought us a grower group of coconut growers in Sri Lanka. Again, a really exemplary grower group. They're all smallholders, about 1 to 2 hectares each. And they came in as a grower group, which means that the audits are long. You do basically the square root of the total number of growers is the number of audits that are done every year. And then you randomly select those every year. So over time you get to all of them. But some of those audits were 8 to 12 days. We worked with smallholders in India with a tribal, in a tribal region where they're growing cotton. And we worked with another co-op of cotton farmers. So all these small farmers were assisted by the brands who want to buy their product, who agree to the buyer's requirements, where they are signing long-term contracts with these co-ops, where they're paying a fair price, and where they're helping support these organizations to develop and build capacity for those workers and farmers in the group. As far as the small farmers, we didn't have a lot of small farms here, some diversified smaller farms, but it's a fair question, and it's something we will be building over time. We have our cost for our fee structure is aimed to really help subsidize for the smaller farm. We bundle with organic audits, so eventually we see like any organic certified certifier will get approved to do rock and be able to add on the additional rock audit, and we'll subsidize it somewhat by having the brands pay more for their fees. The brands are paying twice as much for their fee as a farm. And we also intend to seek funding for a cost share program modeled after the USDA cost share program. And so once we get all the tools for certification in place, I'll be working really hard to develop some partnerships. There's a lot of examples of public-private partnerships like this going on right now. Google just announced like millions of dollars towards something like this, or billions. Danone has committed millions to this. There's a lot of different opportunities, I think, out there of the leading brands who want to support the transition. And so that's what we'll aim for getting help to smaller farmers.
Right, thank you. So I'm scrolling down, I'm seeing we have 20 plus questions that we haven't got through yet, so we probably won't have time. Well, I know we won't have time.
I won't, you answer the rest, I'll be quiet.
No, this next one is also, I'm trying to go pick the ones that, you know, maybe the most relevant here. But will certification, this is from Heather Beach. Will certification level of rock depend on soil and biodiversity outcome measurements, or will it be based on management practices only, as is the case for organic?
Yes, management practices, not on, it's not outcome based.
Okay. Was there a reason? Did you have a big discussion about that, or?
I wasn't there when they had that discussion, but you know, I think Jeff Moyer probably led on that as far as making it process based rather than outcomes based. And yeah, I think it probably would be a longer answer if we could zoom Jeff in. Yeah.
Sure, no, that's fine. Quickly, another one from Heather. Does the ROC framework apply internationally? Is RO regulated by an international body opposed to national regulation of organic? How does the framework account for all the possible production systems you used in the pilot?
we definitely tested it out globally, and we are working with some certifiers based in, you know, the 4 certifiers we worked with through the pilot are EcoCert, MyaCert, Quality Certification Services, and Quality Assurance International. And they all are accustomed to doing international audits, and the framework, it's certainly, you can't, there's no one size fits all for regenerative. I know it's as unique as the location in which it's practiced. And so we have like some areas of the framework that are open to feedback, and like the regenerative practices section in particular, where we want to hear other examples of regenerative. It's super emergent field, just like the soil testing and looking at DNA of microbes in soil and so forth is very emergent. And so we want to be adaptive and responsive to those changes.
Great. So I think we're out of time, and I wasn't expecting to facilitate this part of the discussion. So I may have missed, you know, Tia may have been better at picking the questions and stuff and facilitating this, but we will keep all the questions that came in, and we'll use those questions to guide information sessions in the future, and also things that CODA comes out with on this topic. And thanks to you, Elizabeth, for being here. Wonderful that you're helping us in Canada. I know you're busy with so much down there, especially with the situation with the fires and everything too.
Yeah.
So wonderful for you to join us. And yeah. And Tia, thanks for showing up as well and facilitating when you were there. But sorry that you had your problems with the technology. And yes. But I think we've done all right. So
I think we did okay. Thanks for facilitating those questions. And I feel like you should have answered some more of them. And Dag, did you want to close with? Did you all have a statement you were going to share from CODA about that? Because I didn't.
Yeah, that's good.
Or is that
Thanks
too long?
Yeah. So CODA is working on a policy statement on the regenerative as it relates to organic. And so the board is going to be reviewing the first draft of that in the next few days here. And so you can look forward to seeing this policy statement. So the reason why CODA is handling this, and we've got a committee that's working on it, is that we want to kind of set the baseline. So, you know, here's what we believe needs to be a part of it, and here's what we think is maybe not proper regenerative from the organic perspective, and so on. So it's kind of framing it, and we'll be looking for input from all of our stakeholders as well. So
cool. I look forward to seeing.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and looking forward to continuing this conversation with you all. All right.
Thank you. Thanks for having me and coming around. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Yes.
Dag. Bye.
Bye.